Line on this Monday. Thanks for joining us. Professor Kent Seiler's with us. Good morning, sir. Nice to have you on. It's always a pleasure talking politics with him. The number 737-7587 if you want to jump in. Just the latest with the debate this past weekend. Of course, the new dynamic that's been added to this presidential race, the Supreme Court. And that is one of the most important things any president does. And if they're lucky, if the time comes for their legacy, they get to appoint a justice. And that it's going to be either this president or it's going to be the next one that will replace Scalia, who passed away this past week. So what do you think? Let's go to Greg. Greg, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Nick.
Hey, Greg.
Hey, yeah. As far as the debate goes, you know, my view on that is that it was just a show for the public to have, you know, Phil Valentine and Bill Journal to talk about and yap about and that type of thing. But the Supreme Court judge here, that this is one of the most important positions there is in this country.
Yeah, no doubt.
Talking, supposedly we were supposed to have an advantage by having 5 conservatives to 4 liberals. Well, that hasn't really worked out very good as far as a lot of issues. So what I see happening is, for one thing, you know, I've said before, our government is just organized crime. So they're going to put whoever they want in there, and the American people are the ones that get hurt. But the one thing that concerns me the most is that for someone as important as he is and as important of a position that he has, they're not doing any type of autopsy or anything. That raises a red flag to me. As important of a person this guy is and what position he holds, it should be mandatory that they do a autopsy and find out why he died or how he died, since it was such a surprise and such a shock.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm looking at the report. It says he was pronounced dead. The death certificate will say the cause of death was natural and that he died of heart attack. And you're right, no autopsy has been ordered. They say no autopsy was necessary. So I guess this was according to the Presidio County judge there. She talked to Scalia's doctors in Washington, D.C., who told her he had been sick and had been at the office as recently as Wednesday and Thursday before going on this hunting trip, and that Scalia had told his group Friday at dinner he was not feeling well, went to his room early, he missed breakfast, they found him the next morning. So apparently, based on what they've learned from the doctors, I see what you're saying, Greg, and I know how you think that way, but it seems to me like there's no indication whatsoever right now of foul play, and without an autopsy, I guess we'll never know for certain, even though I believe that the death certificate spells out that it was natural causes.
Yeah, there'll always be questions.
I guess. There's not a question for me. I believe it as it is. And again, Greg, though, sometimes. And by the way, he makes a good point, too. And I don't want to get too much into Supreme Court, makeup. But oftentimes the nominees, from be it a Republican or Democratic president, don't always. A lot of people say, oh, well, that Republican nominated this, and he's going to be hardcore, or vice versa. And I respect the heck out of the Supreme Court for that. A lot of times you think you're getting something, and it turns out they'll have some decisions. They're not just cutting wool one way or the other.
Yeah, there's no guarantees on how these justices are going to vote, and there really shouldn't be. They should take each issue on the facts and make those decisions, and we do get that occasionally.
Yeah, so you just never know sometimes what you're going to get with these justices, who of course are justices for life. Sure. So they're immune to worried about public opinion. They do what they think's right. Let's go to James. Hi, James.
Good morning.
Good morning. What do you think, James?
Well, I think that President Obama ought to do his job right away, for one. And for number 2, I think that a lot of American people are tired of having an avant-garde form of stalwart Republican process shoved down their throats. And that's what's happening in our country today is if they determine what you get paid and they determine what your cost of living is at the same time. And, you know, we're trying to get back a real freedom where a man can work for a living, but our jobs have been exported for cheap labor. And that's all Republicans want is cheap labor in one way or another. And, you know, we're going to change it. You know, we will overcome one way or another. And that's all I have to say. Look up stalwart politics.
All right, thank you. Yeah, listen, thanks for your call. Now, the president has said, I guess, quote, in due time, he will nominate a successor, which is absolutely is right. Now, keep in mind, the Republicans, and I think Obama, when he was in the Senate, I think he was part of a filibuster. I think it was with, was it Judge Alito or some others? I mean, this stuff happens. So don't act like it's just Republican or Democrats who do this. But he certainly has every right to nominate a candidate for the courts.
Yeah, I think so. And again, it's the Senate's ability to based on the facts of the nominee, vote up or vote down. I think they will lose an argument if they just become obstructionist.
Right.
If it's got to be about the nominee eventually.
How will he frame this thing? Because you're right. So the president will nominate someone, hopefully who's palatable to both sides to some degree.
Right.
No one's going to be perfect. You know that. But then how will he frame it? If he can point out that, look, this Republican Senate is simply not even giving them a look.
Sure.
And it's almost rubber stamped no before they even look.
Yeah.
That would hurt the Republicans, wouldn't it?
Yeah, he needs to make the argument about the nominee.
Yeah, say, look, this guy's great. Or this woman's great. Why are you not looking
the
at
argument
this?
needs to be about the nominee, not about the timing, not about how much time he has left in office. It needs to be about the nominee, and they'll do. That's what they'll do.
Yeah,
I'm convinced. And James had a very interesting point, and it's a lot of what's happening in this race this year, both on the Democratic and Republican side. A lot of voters feel that the economic system in this country is rigged, and that people who work for a living are finding it much tougher to make those wages. It's one reason Donald Trump is doing well. It's one reason Bernie Sanders is doing well. You've had something happen in New Hampshire that was really incredible, where both establishment candidates, Democratic and Republican, got beat. So, what James said has a lot of people feel. Now, you can blame both parties probably, but it is one of those things that is spurring this dissatisfaction and is responsible for a lot of the unusual things that are happening in this race.
Yes. All right, let's go next to Taylor. Hi, Taylor.
Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
Well, it's been a exciting weekend in politics. I have just a couple of comments I'd like to make. One is, for the last couple of these debates, both Democratic and Republican, it appears that the establishment of both parties are loading these audiences with people that they want to get the most cheers or the most boos from. And I thought the one in South Carolina was just sounded like a wrestling match crowd, the way they were going crazy. I understand there were 1,600 tickets given out for audience members. 600 of them went to the candidates, and 1,000 was retained and given out by the parties. And so the party, of course, is going to give the most tickets to the candidates that they would prefer. So I thought that just turned into a zoo over there.
I agree. What did you observe? Because I'm glad you brought that up, Taylor, because to me, there were a lot of booing and hooting and hollering when it came to things that Donald Trump was saying.
Yeah.
And he took a beating from the crowd anyway, I thought. And I'm wondering if that was because the establishment there in South Carolina doesn't look at him as a viable candidate, so they purposely stacked the deck against him. I don't know if you noticed that. Did you notice? It seemed to me that they really were booing Trump some on some of his comments.
Well, I am certainly not a Trump supporter.
Yeah,
so,
but I just noticed that.
I will say I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
And a lot of the booing started before he got even a first full sentence out on some of these. But, of course, some of his remarks were worthy of a boo, but I just thought everything went overboard the entire way over there. And as far as Alito is concerned, Scalia, he has been a giant and will be hard to replace. The Republicans have, for the last 30 years, though, the Republican presidents have done a poor job, I'm not speaking of his appointment, but others not turning out the way they kind of hoped that they would, mainly because they would just pick candidates that would get through rather than ones that would carry out the philosophy that they thought they would. So, again, I'm disappointed the way the Democratic Party and the Republican Party have acted in these debates. And that's one thing about George Washington. Bless his heart, he didn't like parties at all. So, happy birthday to one of our greatest. Thank you.
On this President's Day. Hey, thank you for your call, Taylor. Always interesting. Yeah, that's right about George.
He was right. Yeah, he thought they would be destabilizing to democracy. And
yeah. Do you? By the way, do you think there was anything to this? We were talking during the break about how you wonder if sometime after South Carolina, before the next the primaries, that maybe the Republican Party takes a step to try to focus in on some of the more established candidates. If the real established Republican Party, for whatever reason, feels that Trump and perhaps Cruz, if they become the nominee, don't have a chance of winning.
Sure.
Because of they're so, volatile maybe for the general populace of this country, that they'd say, look, we have got to find a way to get one of these number 3 guys up there. Do you think that could happen? And maybe that was some of what we saw with how they set up the cheers in that debate?
It's going to be, there's going to be a last-ditch effort to try to find basically anyone but Cruz or Trump. The caller I noticed it too, and you were the booing threw Trump off some, which you can imagine.
He's not really used to that.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine, but the way those usually work, though, it doesn't necessarily have to be a conspiracy. It's just they're mostly Republican insiders, establishment people who get those tickets. So they get in, and most of them are supporting someone else. The Trump people, who are kind of outsiders, don't get the tickets.
Okay, that makes sense.
But we're reaching a pivotal time. This South Carolina primary will probably have Trump 1, Cruz 2. Third place there is incredibly important because there could be, and how you do it is still tough, but there could be one last-ditch effort for the Republican establishment to get behind one of the other candidates, put pressure on the other two to drop out. I'm talking probably Rubio, Bush, or Kasich.
Kasich, right.
So watch third place in South Carolina. Watch what happens in Nevada, because Super Tuesday has a lot of delegates on March 1st when Tennessee votes. So they've almost got to do something before then. Otherwise, Trump could be well on his way.
And your belief is that the Republican establishment, when we say established, it means the traditional Republicans, the party people, and we've already established that Cruz and especially Trump are more outside, especially Trump more the outsider. Just think that that's not the candidate for them, and they believe that if that's the person who heads up their party come election time against the Democrat, that they could live with them maybe if they thought they could win, but they don't think they can win.
They don't think they can win. When we say establishment, it's the people who want to win. They're less concerned about ideological purity. They want to win, and they with Donald Trump feel that not only could he lose badly in a general election, but that he might take some congressional, some senators and congressmen with him. So there's a fear there of what might happen, especially with Trump, and a lot of that goes with Cruz too. Now, let's say, and you and I talked about this on a show last, summer. We never thought Trump would get to this point, honestly, and neither did they. So Trump has been underestimated the whole time. So maybe he won't be as bad a general election candidate as they assume, because, if there's any one consistency of this whole election, it's been underestimating Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's funny. We kept waiting. I've stopped waiting.
Exactly.
To me, he is now certainly, beyond a shadow of doubt, whether you like him or not, a player in this. A big-time player. And depending on how things go in South Carolina, and then certainly Super Tuesday, he could be the man. We'll take a break. We'll be back with more of your calls. Stay on hold right after this.